So the day before yesterday was the 45th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. So raise your hand if your pastor or preacher mentioned abortion at church on Sunday. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now raise your hand if your pastor or preacher did not mention abortion on Sunday. Okay, so some of you clearly didn't go to church on Sunday. Shame on you. No, yeah, right, no. We don't go to church. We are the church. If you didn't go to church, but you were being the church, then you're okay with God. I think that's the way that works. Yeah, we got a real milquetoast sermon on Sunday about, it had one point. The gospel is true. It's like he forgot he was preaching to Christians. Like, we knew that. Okay, let's get a little deeper, shall we? Well, anyway, 45 years, the slaughter continues, 60 million children. There's only one candidate of the 6 Republicans who's even making a priority to try and stop that in Oklahoma. And it's great that we have Bill here today to talk about the polling. The truth is, no one's paying attention. No one was paying attention to this race for governor during the holidays, and it's only just now starting to heat up. So really, his poll is just kind of gives us a baseline to get started, and it's going to be interesting to see how it develops over the next weeks and months as these campaigns really kick it into high gear now that they're advertising and they have money and they're sparring and things are happening. I'll tell you, Dan Fisher kicked off in a big way. We saw Todd Lamb's popularity dropping like a rock. The undecideds are way up. This race is wide open. It's anybody's game. But on Saturday, Dan had a rally in Tulsa that I went to. There were 300 people there. And they weren't all just like from the building, like from that church building that hosted it. They were from all over the state. I had people coming up to me that I had never met before and went, "Oh, so you're the OCPAC guy," and started talking about our newsletters and things. So we are communicating to the state. People come out in flocks to hear Dan. In only 3 days, he raised $32,000. You tell me he's not legitimate. What other candidate can raise that kind of money in 3 days that's not from a bunch of rich folks at a private party? So this is very exciting. His abortion video has been seen by hundreds of thousands of people. It's been shared over 2,000 times. His political ad that makes fun of the other candidates has been seen, as far as we know, over 500,000 times and shared over 4,000 times. So it's just astronomical the kind of play he's getting statewide, and he's starting to get attention even from other states that realize it's a small Christian state like Oklahoma that could be the first one to do this. The people in Texas are looking at us going, we hope they win this Red River rivalry and that they stop the flow of the Red River, the bloody river, first. That's all very exciting. So let's see, what else is going on that we need? Any other announcements? I want to get Bill up here pretty quick. We can always talk shop after he's done talking. Let's go ahead then. Let's go ahead and get Bill Shapard from SoonerPoll up here. Start diving into the numbers. I'll tell you when it's 10 till, so maybe we can ask a few questions. We'll get you out of here on time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's nice to be back. Thank you very much for having me again.
Put it right here on your chin.
Right here like this? Okay, very good. Thanks. I'm kind of a loud voice anyway, so hopefully everyone will hear me. I don't have to, talk so loud. But thanks so much for having me again. I know. Okay. All right. I got you. Yes, he's mentioning just a few of the most recent polling results that I've got. They're back here. I don't even have them really worked into this presentation yet. But I thought I'd work through this presentation as an election year preview, and then we can talk about some of those numbers that is actually just some... I just put up Trump numbers yesterday, it's all getting there. So let's kind of get right into it. I wanted to show you all this one, okay, because I wanted to give you an idea. This is not polling results. This is an analysis that I did over presidential voting and non-citizen non-voting in Oklahoma. The blue, okay, is Democrat voting in the state. The red is Republican voting in the state. The green is independent or other. And the yellow is non-voting. If you start on the first circle on the inside, that's 1992. That goes all the way to 2016. So every year, okay, is going outside, from the inside to the outside, which shows you that anywhere between 40 and 50% of Oklahomans who are of registered age, who are qualified to vote, do not vote. Okay? Just to give you an idea of when people come to me all the time and they go, oh, you know, Bill, the youth is so excited this year. Will they turn out? And I think of this chart and I think, no. Okay, just this really puts into perspective. It also shows you what I think is interesting is look at for Democrat voting in the state from the inner circle, 20%, 20%, 19, 19, 19. They elected Barack Obama in 2008. After that election, it went to 16 and then went to 14. All right? So it just shows you the impact that Barack Obama, he was the best thing to happen to Republicans in the state of Oklahoma. And this chart shows it right here. Okay? In fact, everyone in this room ought to have voted for Barack Obama because it's the best thing to happen for conservative voices in the state of Oklahoma. If you'll look at the red, the Republican has gone from 16 all the way to 33%. Okay? Huge movement. And then even Oklahoma Watch had a story just yesterday about Republicans continue to increase their percentage of the vote, registration vote in the state of Oklahoma. So again, you can see how this fits right into it. Great chart. This is the stuff that just keeps me at my desk in my jeans and my tennis shoes. And I just love it. I could do this all day long. I wanted to show this to you too. This is voting behavior by party, okay? The first column is registered vote. So again, when this was taken, 47% of everyone registered in the state's Republican, 38% Democrat, 13.8% is independent. But then I want you to look, I took just those that voted in the 2016 general election, just the last general election. 50.9% of everyone that turned out was a Republican. So it shows you that Republicans are voting at a higher level of their percentage of registration by about 4 points. Democrats are the same. It's the independents that drop from 13 to 10. And I've often said that independent registration in the state, while it is growing, it is still people who are more apolitical. They don't want to be a Republican. They don't want to be a Democrat. And quite frankly, they just did it because they just registered, but they don't turn out at any higher grade level. Now, where it is growing, though, for the independents is among those 18 to 34. 18.5% of all people that were 18 to 34 that voted in the 2016 general election are registered independent. But people always come to me and go, Bill, if the youth vote turns out, won't that help Jerry Askins or won't that help Hillary Clinton? And I'm going, no, because 48% of them are registered Republican. Only 32% of those 18 to 34 are registered Democrat. So, you know, you can watch the news and you can hear people, I think media people, who have these preconceived notions in their head as to what they think Oklahoma is, and they're thinking of every place else but Oklahoma. Half of all people age 18 to 34 in this state are registered Republican. So when they talk about, oh, do you think that's the reason why Bernie Sanders won? No, because half of the young people that turned out couldn't even vote in that election because we have a closed primary system. So Republicans can only vote for Republicans. So this is the thing, is that we just have to get beyond some preconceived notions and stop talking about all the things that we think it is based upon some preconceived notion. This is data. This is the actual facts. What I did want to show is that of those that are 65 and older, 49% are Republican that turned out, 45% Democrat. They're the fewest people to be registered independent. But that is where Democrat votes are coming from, are those 65 plus. That's where they're coming from. So if we were to look into the future, okay, obviously those 65 and older, you know, will be replaced by what coming up? More Republicans than Democrats. So that's the reason why Republican registration, in my mind, will continue to grow and Democrats will not. So again, this is all feeding into this concept of, oh my gosh, I got media people calling me up. Donald Trump. The guy's crazy. Nobody likes him. What a weight is that going to be around Republicans' neck in Oklahoma? And I went, it's not. They like him. I mean, I got 58%. I've got 86% of Republicans that are favorable towards Donald Trump. Half of those are very favorable. So he's not a weight around anyone's neck. And the real weight, just so you know, is Mary Fallin. Okay? And we'll talk about her. Okay? All right, so here it is broken down by those that are registered based on age, and then the next column over is those that actually voted in the 2016 general election. I just wanted you to show again, 24% of people registered to vote are between the ages of 18 and 34, but they only make up 19% of those that vote on election day. So again, get this myth out of your head and quit. I'm so tired of people calling me and going, oh, the youth vote's going to turn out for all those Democrats. It ain't going to happen, okay? It's not, the numbers aren't even there, okay? Here's turnout by age group if you want a even more stark way to look at it. There's 18 to 34s are voting 4.5 points below their registration, okay? And then, of course, it literally goes up. 35 to 44 is about even. And then, as you can see, it goes up. Baby boomers, 55, 64s in that 65 plus, all are voting higher than their registration percentage. Here's an interesting chart. I just love this one. The bottom is the number of votes that were cast prior to 2016, okay? And then I broke it down by those 18 to 34s and those 65 plus, meaning that the line is an indication of 18 to 34s, how many had voted at least one election. That's really high at 16%, between 50 and 60,000 had at least one vote before they voted, right? And we would understand that 18 to 34s have less opportunities to vote or create a voter history than those 65 plus. But look what happens. It nosedives literally down to 9, 10 votes. In fact, the crossover is about 4 votes. That's where then at that point, 4 prior votes, that's when then 65 plusers have a much higher number of people who have cast more votes. Now you can look at that and say, well, if you are 34 years old, you had a lot more than just 10 opportunities to vote prior to that. Because if you registered at 18, you had a lot more than just 10 votes to cast. But look at those 65 plus. It shows to me this chart level of engagement. The older you get, the more engaged you get. And this was just a good fun chart in which to kind of show that and show where that is. Now, this is, I just want to talk about, I put a post on SoonerPoll because I wanted to talk about the Republican Party and who's really going to be deciding our next governor, okay? Keep in mind that, 20, 30 years ago, Republicans to win a primary, they would say that you had to just be good at either end of the Turner, right? Which meant that you had to be good in Oklahoma City and you had to be good in Tulsa, and that was just about it. And I can remember the very first election I ever worked on as a kid was for Tim Leonard, who ran for lieutenant governor. And I can remember because I was putting up signs. I was a young kid. And I said, let's drive down to Hobart. Not Hobart. Let's drive down to Hugo. Let's drive down to McAllister. And they would laugh back then in the 90s and go, oh, we're not going back down. We're not going there. That's Little Dixie. There's no Republicans down there. Now that's where the growth of the Republican Party has been. The growth of the Republican Party has been in rural areas. So when we begin to look at this election in comparison to those prior, we have to take into consideration that they will have a greater impact on the primary, on the nomination process than Oklahoma or Tulsa Democrats. Oklahoma or Tulsa Republicans. So this is just to show you that if I take every county, all 77 counties, and remove Tulsa and Oklahoma County, 61% of all of the Republicans are in those 75 counties, okay? Now people go, well, there's some rural vote. There's some suburban vote, right? So here it is broken down by suburban, urban, and rural, okay? Which indicates that 49% of all Republican primary voters are in a rural precinct, a precinct that has been encoded by the census as rural. Okay? It then shows you then that the impact of suburban has. So we really, as Republicans, we're a party of rural voters and suburban voters. Okay? And then if you take it a little further and do it by the metropolitan statistical area, so if you're thinking of Oklahoma City, that's Oklahoma County, that's Cleveland, Canadian, that's Logan, Pottawatomie and McLean, right? That's that whole area. Even though some of that area is very rural, okay, and would be more of a rural voter, I just said, let's break it down. That's where you can see then that it is 30, the rest of state, or those in rural areas, is 33%. So in my opinion, the largest percentage, which is a plurality, the largest percentage of Republican primary voters that will be deciding our next governor candidate will be from a more rural setting. Okay? All right. Now, I showed this because I did, remember all that talk in 2016 where they said that teachers were going to come out in large droves? And I can remember sitting there and thinking, should we be scared of this? I mean, you all know I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican registration, okay? But I try to do all my polling less any type of my own personal bias because I'm more interested in being right. People hire me because I'm right, not because I'm a Republican or I'm a conservative. So I looked at teachers, okay, and I thought, what should we look at here? Interesting enough, I wanted you all to see this, that when I asked the Department of Education for a Freedom of Information request, and they sent me a list of people with 90,000 people in the state of Oklahoma who had a teaching certificate. And then I ran that up against my voter database. Obviously, you can see they are more overwhelmingly female than they are male. 76% female, 23% male. But they are 51% registered Republican. So if you... Really? Yeah. So if you think about it for a second, we are just like in many cases. The OEA is very liberal, but they represent a population that is majority Republican. Think about that for a minute and let that soak in, right? So that's right. They're pushing an agenda that probably half of their population does not support. That's what this chart basically shows. So when we think of teachers and we think, well, they're naturally going to be more Democrat, they're naturally going to be more liberal in their thinking, and that, of course, that's what we see of those that run. We're just seeing more of them run than really Republicans who are I just want to go home to my kids. I want to teach. I want to go home. I don't want to run for public office. So that's the reason why we have these thoughts in our mind that somehow teachers are much more likely to be Democrat and much more likely to be liberal. Now, in Massachusetts or Connecticut, probably different. But here in Oklahoma, in a red state, you have to consider that even half of all teachers are Republican. Huh? Or the liberal Democrat teachers went to Texas. Next to it is the all active voters, so you could just see it as a comparison back and forth. You can see where they are spread out. Okay? Yeah.
This, if I'm reading that second part right, the active voters, where there's only do you mean to say that there's a large number of them are registered in one party or the other? Very few are actually independent. I mean, they do register with parties.
Meaning that what I did was I did an evaluation of all active voters, and 11.8% of them are registered independent. As opposed to teachers, only 6% of them are registered independent.
So teachers have a tendency to register with parties.
That's right. They're much more politically active in their decision, whether it is a Democrat or it is Republican. They're much more opinionated people than the average population overall. Okay? Also, and I think this next one's of their voting behavior. So here's teacher voting behavior versus all voters. So the dark blue is teachers and the light blue is all voters. And so I have at the bottom that they never vote, that the population overall is higher than teachers. And then as you can see, teachers go up to what we call a primary voter. That's those with a score of 60 to 119. When I say a primary voter, that means they're more likely to turn out for primaries. All right? So there's rarely vote, general vote, primary, what we call stakeholders, and super voters. Right? Super voters don't miss anything. Stakeholders vote in city elections. I call them stakeholders because they have a stake in their own community. Okay? So that's how we draw it. General, primary, stakeholder, super voter. And as you can see, teachers are more likely to be primary, stakeholder, and super voters than the average population overall. So they're much more actively engaged in the political process. The problem is half of them are Republican. So if they think there's this huge wave of, just like with the youth vote, if they think they're all going to turn out and vote Democrat or put Democrats in office, it's just simply not true. Okay? Okay, here's Trump favorability versus Mary Fallin favorability. The darker the blue is the darker favorability. So very favorable, then somewhat, no opinion, up to somewhat, unfavorable, and very unfavorable at the top. So as you can see, only 8%. Now these numbers were back in August. I have the brand new numbers right here, but believe me, it's not any better. It's pretty much the same. Okay? Trump does go up from about 55% to 58%. So he rebounded a little bit. I think that's due in large part to the tax reform bill that passed. We are seeing national polling where people don't like it, but that's because of the media influence. You'd be really amazed at how much Democrats or liberals will buy just about anything that's sold to them through the mass media. But the numbers are improving, and that's because you see companies like Apple and companies like Disney come out and start, what? Trickle down. Oh my God, does that mean trickle down works? I don't know. Call me crazy. But what we are seeing is that people are beginning to realize that none of this would have happened under Hillary Clinton. Okay? All right, had she won. All right, but the point is that this Fallin favorability numbers are abysmal. Okay, now let me tell you the kind of the backstory of what I saw on on Mary Fallin. And that is that she really lost. She was at 73% favorability. That meant a lot of Democrats liked her. This was September of 2013, right after the more tornadoes. She looked like, the great empathy, in chief governor. Things were going well. Democrats abandoned her once she would not take Medicaid expansion into the state. That's when most Democrats left her. Republicans left her in May of last year, and I think it is due in large part to the fact that she encouraged Nathan Dahm and others to do abortion bills in the legislature, and then when they got to her desk after all that work and she vetoed it, that's when her far-right base dropped her like a prom dress. So that's the reason why she's at 8 points, very favorable, okay? So the latest post that I have on my website asks the question, could Mary Fallin be the most unpopular governor in modern times? And quite frankly, I think the answer to that is yes. I went back to the 1990s and found polling in the Tulsa World, which is obviously leans to the left and would be favorable to Democrats at that time, just for example. And they found that David Walters, after the midnight appearances in court, that he got down to 35% favorability. That's where Mary Fallin is now. He was steps away from impeachment. And David Walters was where Mary Fallin is right now in favorability. It's how bad it is, really, that nobody seems to be wanting to talk about. Okay. I asked this question. I would prefer that our next governor is from where? Oklahoma City, Tulsa, or the more rural parts of the state? The more rural parts of the state is the plurality of 36%. Oklahoma's unsure was 27%, Oklahoma City 19%, and 16% from Tulsa. Again, continuing to show that a person from rural Oklahoma has a better chance than an Oklahoma. Let me just kind of dispel some myths here. In my polling, I've got Mick Cornett at 24%. He's the largest of anybody in my polling data. But when rural rural Oklahoma discovers that he's not going to bring an NBA team to Ada, or to Enid, or to Ardmore, they're going to have a tough time then looking at him any other way. I've listened to him about 4 times on the radio, and he has a tough time taking a stance on anything. Okay? The point of the matter is that won't last. It won't last. He was even crazy enough on one show to put the word school and the word closing in the same sentence. And so I'm just like, the guy's not ready for prime time. I don't know if there's any Cornett voters in the audience, but I'll just tell you, I anticipate that his numbers will continue to fall. Okay? The more that we have a budget fiasco and Mary Fallin continues to perform poorly and veto potential budget bills, the worse it is for Todd Lamb. There is no doubt in my polling in August when he was 32 and now he's 17 that fall is due in large part to the ongoing budget fiasco at the state capitol. So he has seen, you could look at it and say, well, Todd Lamb's tried to do his best to avoid the problem. Well, that also means he's doing a very good job of avoiding potential solutions. And we don't need a governor, in my opinion, who tries to avoid problems for political reasons. if he was engaged, he would have been probably more likely to be seen as part of the solution rather than part of avoidance, of problem avoidance. So to me, I think he's running a very bad campaign. So in next November's general election for governor, I would vote for a candidate from the Republican Party, Democrat Party, Libertarian Party. Republican 46%, Democrat 27%. So when we look at Republican registration continue to go up, when we look at this particular question, I don't see any weakness as of yet for a Republican. If Mary Fallin had been governor at the time that Frank Keating was governor, we would have been a lot more worried. But we have a weak Republican governor at a time of great Republican expansion in the state. So she is lucky. She is lucky that she happened to be a bad governor at the right time for as far as Republicans are concerned. Okay? Now, I want to throw these out at you, and you'll see a trend here. What's Bill getting at? Bill's trying to test the waters and find out just how in trouble maybe Republicans are. Okay? I asked who you wanted, what party do you want your next governor to be from? Now I'm asking, which party do you think is best at performing the following tasks? And this could be even legislators of that particular party. Obviously, red is Republican, blue is Democrat. Then I've got some greens in there that are both equally or neither, and then the yellow is the unsure, okay? So the first one on the far left is running the state government. Republicans still win that measurement. Now, that information is from August. I have numbers that I just ran first week of January. So that first one is 45% where it was 54. So the numbers are coming down a little bit. Instead of the Republicans being a majority, they're now a plurality. It's 45 to 37. Okay? So as long as the budget fiasco keeps going on, the Republicans are going to run themselves into the ground. Will that happen by Election Day? That remains to be seen. But at least we're getting a baseline and we're showing movement. The next one, balancing the state budget. 51% said Republicans. In this one, it's 47%. So there's a loss of 4 points. Creating a job growth environment. This should be the high watermark for Republicans. That's the reason why I asked it. 58% could be in this determination the high watermark. That drops to 53% in the one that I just did. Adequately funding core services. Republican 41%. It actually went to 44% in this one. Okay? Determining what to tax and how much to tax in order to properly fund state government. That one is 46, and it is 46 in this most recent poll. And then here's where Republicans are going to maybe get themselves into a problem, because we asked funding K through 12 education. That's where the Democrats had a plurality of 44% versus Republicans 40. In this one, Republicans went down a point to 39, and Democrats even went down 2 points. The neither went to 10. So that was the largest growth. But the point of the matter is that K through 12 funding is 50% of our state budget, right? So what are voters saying? Voters are saying, I like Republicans, but man, they just don't know education as well as Democrats. So when the Democrats are able to communicate to the voting public that that's half of our budget, and that half of our budget is under the control of people you don't like, that might be a serious problem for Republicans moving forward. So the point of the matter is that Republicans need to quit shying away from education, and I think they do. I just think they shy away from wanting to talk about it, wanting to reform it, and they've got to be, I'm almost like if the Democrat leader puts out a press release, the Speaker of the House ought to take the same thing and release the exact same worded press release. You know what I'm saying? We almost have to speak on education the way Democrats speak about it, or we're going to continue to lose on this one particular issue. I'm not saying necessarily that they should adopt their policies. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that we need to talk about education the way the Democrats talk about education. I just think they wordsmith it better than us. I'm not saying that they're better policy-wise, because I definitely believe personally that Republicans would be better on education than Democrats. But we just don't do a very good job of communicating that. I went to Tahlequah early yesterday morning, left at 5 a.m. I passed a billboard along the way in Shawnee. Has anyone seen that billboard outside of Shawnee, between Shawnee and Oklahoma City? It's obviously a Democrat supporter, and they've got a billboard. And it says, okay, now what did it say? It said, protect education, vote Democrat. And I'm just like, that's very simple. And to a simple-minded person, they'd probably think that. I look at that and I go, well, really, for better education, vote Republican. That's what I say. Improve education. If you want to improve education, right? But the Democrat, that message, just those 4 words, resonate a lot probably with voters. That's why I think as Republicans, we don't break it down into something just real simple and make it believable and digestible, okay? In my opinion, got to do that. Funding health and human services, it was 39%. It's now 39%, so that hasn't changed. Funding safety and corrections, it was 46. Republicans are up to 49. Funding transportation was at 49. Republicans are now at 47. So a little bit of movement, a little bit of changes. I included those 4: education, health and human services, corrections, safety and corrections, and funding transportation. That makes up 97% of our entire state budget. So there is that broken down. Now,
so much of your polling centers around Republican versus Democrat registration and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think we're more wanting to know about the ideological quality of the voter and the candidate.
Right.
If you look at, for example, the conservative index, where we're looking at specific issues like economic development, et cetera, it looks to us like the state hasn't changed. It is still led by far-left liberals masquerading as Republicans.
Yeah.
Do you have any data that kind of bears that out as well, that the Republicans have left the party and the platform behind?
Yeah. I think that as Republicans, we get very depressed because we vote for these Republicans and then they go down there and somehow they go through some sort of like liberal bath or something. Like they get baptized down there in liberal water and suddenly they're not, I think that's, I think that's part of the problem. I don't think that they're any less really conservative. They're just getting down there and finding it's really a lot harder to try to think about their next election and think about being true to their convictions. And that's the reason why I think groups like OPAC or OCPA or other right-leaning groups need to hold their feet to the fire. And that's the reason why I think polling data continues to show, because imagine if you're a Republican House member and you've got OEA coming in to talk to you about a bill that they want to get passed, and then they say to you, hey, teachers are for this, and if you don't vote for this, you have probably 150 teachers in your district, and they vote, and blah, 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 blah. What would you do? That's the reason why I do some of this analysis, is because I want to communicate to that Republican House member, guess what? They're just as Republican as you are. So quit listening to that stuff. All right? I think that that's what happens, and I think that that's what we have to do as groups, is continue to show that the conservative value, and I talk Republican and conservative almost interchangeably because, quite frankly, we're polarized there, right? In the 60s or 70s or 80s, you could have a Rockefeller Republican, right? Just like you could have a, I'm trying to think of a far right or conservative Goldwater, or I'm thinking of a Democrat.
Oh, okay.
No, like a real conservative Democrat. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot more of that. We have now become so polarized that the ideological label and the party affiliation is almost on top of each other. There's so much like. So that's the reason why I think that as conservative groups, we have to hold them accountable. We have to hold their feet to the fire, and we can do that through showing them data like this and making them really truly think about their next election. Go ahead.
Is school choice support up or down?
Okay, school choice is Oklahoma voters like school choice. Okay, but we as school choice supporters are fighting the largest, most aggressive, most dangerous, bureaucratic associations that still survives in our state today. And I'm talking about the educrats. I'm talking about the Superintendents Association. I'm talking about the Teacher Leadership Association is what I should probably call them. I'm talking about the school board associations. These groups will do anything they can, and they see that this threatens their livelihood of being able to completely control schools and keep the status quo. And so it is an uphill battle at this point. And so I am personally a supporter of school choice, but and the public supports it. I've come out with plenty of polling to show that. I've even come out and shown that teachers support school choice. I have to keep in mind that when I did that teacher matchup, the 90,000 people with a teaching certificate, I had all their email addresses too. I sent them an online sample survey, and I got a sample of teachers, and I asked them questions about it. Quite frankly, they'd come back and they'd say, hey, you know what? At a plurality, I'm more interested in putting my own kids in a private school than a public school. I mean, oh my Lord, have mercy. What's going on here?
So the fear of the politician is, are you saying it's an irrational fear? They see the marketing, they see the billboards and the teachers unions, and they're just afraid when they don't need to be?
I think so. Yes, very much so. I think school choice is something that will eventually happen. In my opinion, it's the only thing that will improve schools. I mean, we're right now looking at how many stories do we have to count that we see a teacher that's doing some sort of inappropriate behavior with a student. And I don't care whether you're male or female, it's happening, both sides, right? We see this story just in the newspaper a couple of days ago. Some guy taking his second graders out to PE, takes all of his clothes off and starts running around the playground. I mean, did anyone else see that story? I mean, what's going on? What's going on? The point of the matter is that I look at it, and I have said to even some state house and state senate members, hey, I tell you what, if you go to a school and you find that there's a teacher there that has been putting sexual advances on a student, and even though the teacher is going to be gone, why don't you allow any of those students in that school to be able to get a ticket out and go to a school of their choice? No. It's like a prison, man.
Yep.
It's a prison. There's a fight or somebody gets stabbed to death and suddenly you can't leave the prison? What's going on here? So my point is that it's all status quo, all put up with it. I've even said, why don't we terminate administrators who have hired a teacher who ends up doing something inappropriately? At least hold somebody accountable. Can't even do that. Threaten somebody's job. Point of the matter is that just shows you just how big of an aggressive, dangerous association and it's a conglomerate of all of them, and it's why school choice is going to always just kind of plod along and not have much success until we can really deal with that. Yes, sir. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
One quick question before I have a different one.
Yeah.
Have leadership in the House and the Senate, Republicans, asked you to come and do this presentation before their members?
I have two House members that have approached the House leadership about me doing it. I have yet to get a call.
Okay. Here's my other question, and I'm seeing this on national news now, as Democrats are trying to gin up their hopes and their opportunities for the coming 2018 election. They're pointing back to the special elections in Oklahoma, conservative Oklahoma.
All right.
And so here's what I think's happened. I'd like for you to comment on that. On these special elections, because there are some Republicans that are downcast with the performance of not only Congress but our legislature here. They are a little hesitant to turn out in these special elections. Well, the Democrats are raising a lot of money, some up from out of state. They're focusing all their activists on one place. They've got some fairly articulate candidates in some cases. So when they focus, they have a better chance to win one. But what we saw that going into the 2016 election. In the 2016 election, when they couldn't focus, they couldn't raise the money for all of them, Republicans made big gains again. Is that an accurate analysis of things?
I think you're right. I think that your analysis is on more or less the D side. Now let me give you now the Republican side of it. Before I do that, though, let me just say that if Mary Fallin was a Democrat, she would have a majority favorability. It shows you, and I think that we all know this instinctively.
She did go to the dark side.
Well, I know, but my point of the matter is that we see time and time again that Democrats will support their elected officials to the death. Okay? They do. As Republicans, we typically will abandon them much sooner when we discover that they're corrupt or they're,
that's what they need to hear down at the Capitol, Bill, what you just said there. So.
I know.
One other quick question, since I still have this.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll say the Republican side of the coin, but go ahead.
Yeah. You talked about a rural candidate for governor might have a better opportunity, more favorabilities than an urban. We have 2 Republican governors candidates from Tulsa, 2 from Oklahoma City, 1 from Banner, Oklahoma, and 1 from Lawton. My question to you, between those 2, between Banner and Lawton, who might you see with the better chance here? And I might also, mind you, I was at a meet and greet for Dan Fisher last night in Owasso, and 3 of those that contributed to him were teachers. Okay?
Okay. I want to answer my first question, and then I want to come back to that. What I said, that you said on the special elections, the problem is that what I see is that Republican candidates are running general or primary election strategies in special elections, and that's not going to work. Okay? Meaning then that when they put together their budget and their strategy, they're doing it like they were running a traditional primary or general where there is an expectation of people that would turn out anyway to vote for them. A special election is a completely different animal. Completely different animal. And the Democrats are good or are better at that. First of all, Republicans need to sit up and recognize we are not running the campaign correctly. Meaning then that we have to energize people through more direct voter contact and get away from the more of, I just need to get my name out there and I need to send out some mailers where I use the word Republican and conservative and family values and blah, 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 blah. Special election voters don't care as much about all of that. They care more about the far more extreme ideas that these candidates express. We had a transgendered, is it woman or man, that won a Republican Senate seat? Honestly, and you're telling me that we lost that because we didn't communicate enough mail to the conservative values of the Republican? No. It's because they did not get their vote turned out, and that traditional Republican conservative family that, okay, they follow politics a little bit, but they're more interested into their boys' baseball game, going to work and going to that and going home and having dinner. And they're less likely to vote in special elections. Special election voters is a whole other kind of animal, okay? So again, I think not only are Democrats better at what you said, you address the Democrat side, I'm addressing the Republican side, they are not running the right campaigns. Okay, so now, let's get to your 2 Republicans running in rural areas. While my polling data supports the concept that a candidate from a more rural setting could have a better chance, that does not mean then that rural voters will gravitate to them if they don't do enough to communicate directly to them. Meaning that you have the ability to be successful there, but then you have to go execute for that to actually be successful. Okay? So what I'm saying is that I question the 2 rural Republican gubernatorial candidates' level of ability to go execute in rural areas. Okay? The other thing, and I know that there's a lot in this room that support Dan Fisher. I will tell you, the abortion issue is not a winner anymore. It's not an issue like it was 20 or 30 years ago that there was a small group of Republicans that that's all they cared about and that's all they would go and vote. Okay? If you go to SoonerPoll.com, every single time I go into the field, I ask people's level of church attendance. I ask them whether they're evangelical or not. And over the 15 years that I've been doing this, the number of people who say that they go weekly or more than weekly has gone down. And the number of people that identify as evangelical has gone down. It's not just in Oklahoma. Nationwide, the level of religiosity has gone down over the course of time, which also correlates with this concept that abortion is not an issue you can just place your candidate on and expect to win in a Republican primary. So I only say that because I think Dan may make the mistake of just being labeled the abortion candidate in this race, and people who do not consider that to be as important to them anymore may end up picking another candidate. Let me give you an example. He mentioned marijuana. Marijuana at this point, absent any kind of money spent against it, will pass. The numbers show that half of all the people in my poll who identified themselves as evangelical favor medicinal marijuana. Even a plurality of people who go every Sunday and every Wednesday to church, a plurality favored medicinal marijuana. Guys, we're in a completely different situation, and gals, we're in a completely different situation than where we were 30, 40 years ago, where abortion was so much more of an important issue to Republican voters. Okay? Also, I think it should be considered that as the Republican Party grows, it will bring more and more people who are less passionate about our core issues. Abortion being one of them, we get more and more Republicans. It doesn't mean we're growing the passion against abortion. We're growing just people who more loosely identify with us, right? So the point is that there is while it's an increase, it's a loss in the level of importance to that issue.
Bill, where do the gubernatorial candidates stand on medical marijuana?
That's a good question. I've heard.
Pat Campbell asked that question of each candidate, so they are on record one way or another. And almost all of them say they're in favor of it theoretically, but they're voting against the state question because of problems that might cause.
Yeah.
We're running close to one. Let me try and squeeze in two more questions.
All right. And before that question, I just want to say, too, and that is that the medicinal marijuana issue would not be an issue in our primary had Mary Fallin not put it on the ballot. I think we all should be mad at her for that. She should have put it on a February ballot, or she should have put it on the runoff ballot in August. Well, we don't care about it. She's now, obviously she was smart enough to not put it on the general election ballot, but she wasn't brilliant enough to keep it off the primary ballot. So again, she's injected this issue into this discussion, and in all fairness, I think will end up hurting the Republican choice. So let me go to him, and then we'll come right back here. Go ahead.
Well, you talk about teachers supporting, a plurality of teachers supporting school choice. Do you believe that many of them, or have a sense, would they also support putting their own children in another form of education?
Yeah, that was part of the other thing is that I can't remember the numbers. I don't have them here, but they were more like. If look at it this way, if we're going to look at, okay, so maybe they like school choice and maybe they're a little more casual about it, but when you ask them a question specific to would you put your own children, if you had a choice, would you put your own children in a public school or let's say a non-public school? They prefer the non-public school. So what does that tell you? They're thinking about their own kids, and they're thinking where they might get the best education, and that's the reason why. Didn't we just see the Epic charter schools, the virtual school, come out, and they're paying teachers 50 to 100% more than the average teacher for public education? Wouldn't we all as Republicans benefit greatly from taking the state legislature out of deciding whether teachers get raises or not and put it into the private sector and make schools competitive for teachers? Can't we communicate that to teachers so that they see that they don't have to sit and rely on a bunch of politicians for a raise, that they could then basically get merit pay by going into a more competitive environment? Believe me, guys, this is where we need to include teachers and make them part of our coalition if we're going to get that passed. I don't mind answering some more questions if they're some, but I don't want to.
It's a little after 1. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. Everybody,
Okay.
thank Bill for being here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.